Muchas gracias de la invitación, muchas gracias de la oportunidad de hablar de lobos aquí en Galicia, en España, y en frente de muchísimos amigos. Lo siento mucho, pero no voy a hacer la charla en castellano y tampoco en gallego. No puedo hablar por una hora, me faltan demasiadas palabras, entonces voy a hacerla en inglés. Espero que no hay problema. I'm going to talk to you about the situation of the wolves in Europe in general. So it's a sort of summary of the status of the wolves, where are the main problems and what is still to be resolved if we want to have a permanent and effective coexistence between humans and wolves. Just a few minutes ago, the Galician television was asking a question, why Galicia is important for wolves. I mean, Galicia is a center of, it's one of the best examples I know of wolves living close to humans. And as such, is fantastic, because it shows that wolves are not the beasts of the wilderness that have to be saved in mountains and away from humans. And in fact, if we adopt that philosophy, there would be no wolves in Europe, because we don't have any wilderness left, or at least there would be very few. So I think it's very appropriate to give this talk here in Galicia. And I have una ponencia muy larga, so many slides will be skipped very fast. First of all, just a bit of introduction. I'm chairing this group, which is a group called the Large Carnivore Initiative for Europe. It's a group formed back in 1996 by WWF, and it's a small group of experts dealing with those 5 species, and it's part of the IUCN. So much of what I'm going to present to you is actually the work of this group. It's not only my stuff. And I like to begin with this very funny picture, because this one was published in the journal Science. So it's not the last of the scientific journal. But this is the way people, even important journals, understand that there are carnivores out there. You can see that there are small little animals almost everywhere here. By the way, Spain, I don't know why it's down here, but don't worry. And this was the original distribution of the wolf in Europe. So they were everywhere with some exception. But they were everywhere, and now they've been reduced very much. This was in the 60s, where probably the lowest peak of distribution of wolves in Europe, and there were left only, of course, Spain. Sierra Morena was much larger dot than you will see in the next picture. In Italy, basically in the central southern part of the Apennines, and then of course this block here in the Dinaric Mountains down to Greece, and then here. All the rest was empty. But then things changed, and this was in 2006, when the Large Carnivore Initiative made the first pan-European survey, and we came up with this map. And you will see here the map is, it's interesting. Again, the wolves had already expanded from the Apennines, went into the Alps here. And even the dot up here expanded quite a bit compared to the early years. But the interesting expansion even here in former Yugoslavia and Bulgaria. The Carpathian Mountains, this shape here is the Carpathian. And then again up here in Sweden and Norway, where the wolves came back. So, you know, in 2006, the picture was much more positive. Now, for the first time ever, so This is a real new map. This is the first time I show it because we completed 2 weeks ago. So these are the new data that we have collected early this year, 2012, and this is the situation of the wolves in this year. And we are doing this for, again, when I say we, it's always the Large Carnivore Initiative. We are doing this for the European Commission, who has asked us to produce a report on the status of all the bears, wolves, and lynx, and for a renewed effort of finding solution for coexistence. I will tell you more about that later. Well, basically, the situation is what we saw in the earlier picture. So we have wolves again here in the Alps, which is new, expanding here from Slovenia, expanding here. This is very interesting. From eastern Poland, now we have wolves here in the eastern part of, in the western part, sorry, of Poland and the eastern part of Germany. And there are dots here. And the first wolf was seen in the Netherlands a few months ago. But, I mean, wolves walk. They walk. They have 4 legs, and they go far when they walk. So, for example, there are 2 wolves here, you know it, behind Barcelona, and they are from the Italian stock, so they must have come all the way here. But that's no surprise. A wolf, an Italian wolf, we know it from genetic, that we had monitored here, down here in southern Piemonte, has been killed near Bonn, up here, early this year. So if somebody asks you where wolves could be in Europe, the best answer would be anywhere, anytime. That doesn't mean that they are permanent there, you know, because dispersing, they can go anywhere. And they can go thousands of kilometers, of course. Okay, now, to come up, just a second, to come up with this kind of overall picture, we assemble a diversity of data. And each country has its own method, its own idiosyncrasies, its own way of accepting uncertainty. So the variety of information that we have been using is incredible. Sometimes in Croatia, I just give you examples. In Croatia, we do have a very good index of abundance, for example, here. Very good data on the animals that have been killed. And I go fast here because there's really no point in discussing each of the information given in the slides. The French have a very effective monitoring system. So every year they produce a map of the new areas colonized by the wolf and the areas lost by the wolf in the previous year. And they have a very good index of demographic increase and geographic increase, how much the range is expanded. So, I mean, the monitoring system is there. And this is extremely important, because when we talk about management, we need to talk of figures, of numbers, where they are. And if we don't have this monitoring system in place, we are talking on the basis of personal opinion. And my opinion is the same as your opinion, your opinion, your opinion. So your personal opinion are not very strong. So we need good figures to do management. But what kind of figures? We'll see in a moment. So here, for example, we do have the information on the Western Alp, and some of this information is extremely good. Here, Francesca Marucco, the woman in charge of the monitoring of the wolf in Piemonte, produce every year a map with each pack. But this is a beautiful work that costs a lot of, not money, but human resources. 300 people work on this monitoring every winter. During their normal patrols, this is forestry people, rangers, and they collect all this. The difference is that this work is organized in advance, so people know where to go, when to go, and what to look for. So in the end, you can bring this data together, and then you can produce this beautiful results. So we can, for Piemonte, we can produce every year figures like that. So we know exactly how many packs there are. and more or less how many animals for each pack, and so on. We can do that because we can count on snow cover, of course, and then we do a lot of genetic analysis from scats that we collect every year. But if we have this very good data for Piemonte, we don't have the same data for the rest of Italy. So I can say that there are 70 wolves in Piemonte, and the rest of Italy, I don't know, maybe anything between 600 and 900. It's a huge bracket. But we don't have the same system for the rest of Italy. And Germany, in the last, they have a good monitoring system, and so from the early days, 2000, with just one pack here, now we do have more pack coming here. And as I told you, one wolf just seen in Netherlands, one in Denmark, and maybe the wolves will colonize Denmark too. Finland, again. So for the sake of management, and I will come back to this point many times in the rest of my talk, in the Large Carnivore Initiative, we decided not to talk anymore of how many wolves are in each country, but to identify major populations. Now, from a biological point of view, there is just one population in Europe because they can move so much, so, you know, through dispersal, they are potentially all connected. But for management purpose, we define population in a much more restrictive way, and we identify this major 9 different populations. Here, 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 here. I will come back to this in a moment. All of them, or almost all of them, are expanding or trying to expand, with some notable exception down here. And maybe down here, maybe. We'll come back to that. So these are the major population that we identify. Oh, it's a different version of PowerPoint, so the dots are all shift to the right, but you should go back to the left. Okay, numbers. Everybody wants to know numbers, you know, how many? Well, these are some numbers, and show the difference between our assessment in 2006 and our current assessment, 2012. And most of the populations are either stable or increasing. Now, it really doesn't make a difference. If here we say one pack, Sierra Morena, and somebody here will say, no, there are 2. Okay, there are 2. It really does not make much of a difference. And if here we say 2,500 Iberia, no, it's 2,000. Well, really? I would challenge all of this statement. So I wouldn't say that it's an order of magnitude, but it's a figure around which there is an error that we don't know exactly, but there is certainly an error that we should take in account. Some of these estimates are better than others, but some are just guess estimates, just big guesstimates. I don't want to go through this huge table. This is the results of the assessment that we have done in the past few months. And for each population, Scandinavian, and for each country, we have the best estimate. Some of them, as I said, are excellent, done by extensive snow tracking, wolf howling, genetic analysis. Some other are just guesstimate. I'm speaking for my own country, my own region, because the Apennines, for that, for example, for the Apennines, we just have guesstimates. Let me go to the next one because it's more relevant here, because this is the Italian peninsula, maybe 500, 800. The Alpine population is much better estimate. So we do know that this 250 is a very good number. Maybe not 250, it's 300. But this one, 600, 800, it's a rough estimate. It could be 1,000 easily, I have no idea. So when we come to Iberia, well, here we say 2,000 for Spain. We could discuss for hours. what's this number, and what is this robustness of this estimate. But anyway, the order of magnitude is around this one. Sierra Morena, very small one. That was early one. Now it's just one pack detected, none in 2011. Maybe now 1, 2. Some of you has better data. Please come up. I'll be very happy to collect new information myself with Juan Carlos, who has been helping us in doing this. Anyway, the most important thing here is not the numbers, but is this judgment here. Stable, increase, decrease. That's what is really important for us. In fact, this is what I call the obsession of numbers. When you speak of wolves or bears, people are always obsessed. How many there are? How many? It's the first question. And my answer, when I want to be provocative, is why you want to know? Well, because if we have 100 is something, if we have 1,000 is something else. For what? For what? Are you interested in knowing how many foxes are out there? Why you are not so obsessed with foxes? Why don't you spend millions of euros to find out how many foxes are out there? Because nobody cares. Because they don't do any damage. So it really is not important to know if there are 1,000 foxes or 10,000 foxes out there. But you want to know about wolves because you think that the more wolves there are, the more the damage. Okay, then what you are interested in is the level of damage, not the level of wolves. If you had 10,000 wolves out there in Spain and they were not doing any damage, would you still be so obsessed in knowing how many wolves there are? No. So the real important thing is not how many wolves, but first of all, whether they are increasing or decreasing. That's the important thing. And then how much conflict they cause, how much damage they cause. Of course, if the population is at very low levels, then we are interested in knowing how many animals there are left. Because if there is only one pack, or if there are only 20 animals, well, then conservation issues are really serious, and then we have to act. But if we are floating around 2,000 or 1,000, it's not really very important to spend millions to find out how many there are out there. Now, when I say this to my government, for example, they are surprised. They say, why? Everybody comes to us to ask money to count wolves. So I'm actually speaking against myself, because it's easy to get money to count wolves. But to me, it's money not well spent, unless you have a suspect that the population is such a small number that you really have to know the figures that you have to work with. So, counting animals requires census methods that are usually extremely expensive. And it's very difficult. But if we want to know trends, it's just an index, and it's much easier and much faster. This is something that we should all do. By the way, we are all in Europe, and the Habitat Directive requires us to give us trends, variation in our reporting every 6 years. So we should do that. This is mandatory. This is an option. Okay, trends are basically positive. So wolves are increasing, generally speaking, in Europe. They are increasing here, 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 here. Where you see red dots, well, actually, this is wrong now. this is not increasing anymore. So in general, they are increasing. So we shouldn't worry. The situation has been improving substantially in the last few years. Basically, it's stable in 15 countries, increasing in 11. And the wolf is protected by a number of rules and laws, with all the exception that you know in Spain is one of these exceptions. And so it's not really a species that has been forgotten by our legislations. So increasing in range and in numbers. So it's been a success. Our management has been successful. Can we say that? No, we cannot say that. First of all, because the increase is not the result of a very well-planned program, a rational program, but also because there are many open questions that have been left on the table. And I'm going to spend a bit of time now discussing this open question. What are the factors involved in this expansion of the wolf? Well, first of all, the wolf itself is one of the most flexible and adaptable animals. It's enough not to kill it, and he will survive. My good friend Todd Fuller wrote it in a paper once, and it's the most beautiful description of wolf habitat. Anywhere where it's not killed and find something to eat. So when you hear people saying, but that's not wolf habitat, they should not be there, and say, what is wolf habitat? And everybody has in mind, you know, forest. Forests are not wolf habitat, actually. Wolves are not animals of the forest. They hunt by running. Can you imagine running in a forest? It's not very easy. So they are animals living in open areas, possibly. So what is wolf habitat? Anywhere where they are not killed. And they can move long distance. This wolf has been extremely important for conservation of wolves in Europe, in general. This guy here was hit by a car here, near Parma. I don't know if you know Italy, but anyway, it's the Po Valley. And Parma is down along the big highway from Milano to Bologna. Awful place. Not wolf habitat, you would say, but was hit by a car, was not killed. So the vet said, you know, this animal can recover easily. In fact, a week after, we took it immediately to a place far from humans. After a week, we put a radio collar and released it. And this animal moved here a little bit, came down, and I thought it was coming down toward Abruzzo, let's say so. No, then he decided to go west and start moving here. He came down here, you don't see it because the color is bad, came down to 4 kilometers from Genoa, the harbor of Genoa, so very close to the sea. And then went up and then crossed the border, entered France, went almost to Nice, and decided to go back. Didn't like Nice, go back to Italy, and then eventually was killed by other wolves here. Now, from a biological point of view, this story is trivial, not interesting. We all know that wolves disperse, and they disperse hundreds of kilometers. So what's new? Nothing. From a political point of view, this wolf has been fundamental, because wolves arrived in the French Alps in 1992, and everybody, for many years, have been screaming that the wolves have been reintroduced by the forestry people, by WWF, by Luigi Boitani, by everybody. They could not accept one simple fact, that wolves walk. They walk. People just do not accept. When they see wolves in a new area, oh, who reintroduced them? But I mean, wolves move like a dog. And so when we show this data, suddenly all the discussion about who brought back the wolf to France ended. So politically, this has been extremely important. And the French government changed the way of managing wolves after this story. Okay, other wolves that we monitor through or either radio tracking or genetic, and they have been moving long distance, but so we don't. One of these wolves was killed near München in Bavaria, for example. So, you know, they can go anywhere. And they are extremely flexible. They can eat everything. I don't have to tell you this. You know it very well. And so can we say that the wolf management has been a success? I think there are still 5 big questions open and unresolved before we can claim success. And the first one is fragmentation of management policies. Even though the Habitat Directive is one in Europe, the Habitat Directive says that each country has to manage wolves in its own way. The only mandatory goal is that you reach favorable conservation status, which is a rather fuzzy definition of a viable population, but we don't want to enter in this discussion now. So still today, wolf is managed in a variety of situations. Most of these populations are cross-boundary. They cross one boundary between one or more countries. For example, the Alpine here is Italy, France, Switzerland, and a bit of Austria. Here in the Dinaric, you know, the same population is from Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, and so on. And you cannot manage the wolf in a way in a country and a completely different way in the other country. For example, in the Western Alps, the wolf is totally protected in Italy, and in France is protected, but there are few animals that can be shot every year. So does it make sense that you spend a lot of money in Italy to pay compensation? You spend political resources, because saving wolves costs political resources, social information and social resources, and then at the other side the same wolf is killed. It really doesn't make sense. So this fragmentation is fundamental, like here, Italy and France. But let me say the example here. There are not only international boundaries, even though you could consider that the boundary between Galicia and Asturias and Castilla y León is an international one. But it's a national one, and the way wolves are managed in these different areas is actually very important. So this is also a kind of fragmentation that should be somehow reconciled. Second problem is law enforcement. Wolves are fully, nicely protected by the Berne Convention, Habitat Directive, but then who really enforces this conservation in the field? In most of Europe, this is what we do. I call it benign neglect management. Here, protected on the paper, and then who cares? Do you know anybody that has been brought to court for killing a wolf in Galicia? Maybe yes. You know any? And then you know, but you know how many wolves are killed in Galicia illegally. We don't know the number, but we know that it occurs. I'm saying Galicia because I'm here, but I can tell you Italy, Sweden, same story. So wolves are illegally killed and nobody does anything. So there is no enforcement. Now, let me say, the third problem is, of course, the big old story. Wolves eat what they find, not that they prefer livestock. But if they find livestock in their way, they would kill it. Why not? This has been going on for thousands of years. And humans have found ways of defending themselves for thousands of years. It's not a story of today. And our countries, Italy, Spain, are actually a wonderful examples, because we used guarding dog for ages. And we coexisted by using this defense methods, or prevention method, let's say so. But still, this is a problem. And back in 2000, so this is old data, I will not do this exercise again, it's too complicated. But in 2000, we came up with this figure by putting together with a lot of effort different sources of information. So these are order of magnitude. All bears would do this kind of damage, €1.5 million per year. All lynxes, 4 million. All wolves, 5-6 million. Now this is, again, our order of magnitude. If this, instead of 6, is 8, doesn't make really a big difference. What I want to point out, that these numbers are not huge numbers. What is €5 million for Spain or for Italy? What is it? It's 3 meters of a new highway. I don't know. It's just nothing for our economies, if you look at this way of the problem. But then when you look at local level, you will see that there are serious problems. Numbers of attacks have been increasing in many areas, in many parts of Europe. These are in France, for example. These are the number of attacks and the number of animals killed. Number of attacks here, more than 1,000 here. Number of animals, attacks and animals killed. So, I mean, big figures, especially if they insist in small areas and always on the same shepherd. That's a problem. But I like to compare, just to give you a broad point of view, I like to compare the damage done by wolves and the damage done by wild boars. Normally, the damage done by wild boars is 1 order of magnitude higher than those of wolves. You have to add a 0. But nobody complains about the damage of the wild boar. Nobody. Why? Porque el jabalí es muy bueno para comer, para cazar. So the wolf gets most of the attention in spite of not being the most dangerous animals out there. But having said that the total number of damage being very high, let me say that at local level, even the loss of 1 lamb to a lady like this one, it's a huge loss. So it's a true problem that we have to address. We cannot dismiss it like, okay, little damage, pay compensation, and forget it. That's ridiculous. So we have to address the problem anyway, but put them in context. Let's put them in the right context. Okay, what do we do for managing conflict? We should do this 4 things. We should do, because not every country does all 4. So we should try to prevent the predation. We should try to mitigate the damage by paying compensation. The whole society pay compensation. We should control predators in certain situations where this is expected to be effective. Why not? I have nothing against. I've been working for wolf conservation for 40 years, but since the first year, I've always said, well, if we need to kill a few wolves to save them all, I'm in favor. I'm not an animal rights person trying to defend the life of every single individual wolf. That's foolish if we really think that coexistence is our philosophy. Coexistence means compromise. I renounce to something and the wolf renounces to something. So, we have to find a way in between. And then, of course, the 4th is research all. If we don't have the figures, if we don't have the numbers, what are we talking about again? So I think all 4 are extremely important. Now, very briefly, you all know this traditional way of preventing damage. Shepherd, enclosure, guarding dog, electric fence. This is the fladry used in Poland. Funny way of protecting. It works for some time, not much, but for a short time periods it worked very nice. Nobody knows why. This is just a red flag hanging down, and the wolves somehow are afraid of that. They don't cross it. It doesn't last very long. Soon the wolf will understand what's going on and will pass through. And then, of course, you would have a sheep with a dog, and then shepherd. All the shepherds know very well that a guarding dog is not the solution, because he's there not to fight with the wolf. He's there to bark and call the big man who comes to with a gun. That's the way it works. And very often you also need a little hysteric dog that is much more alert than the big one, and then when he see the wolves, he bark, and then call the big dog, and the big dog come, and then he will bark again, and then here comes. So all 3 together, that's the unit that has been working for thousands of years. Thousands of years. And we know data, we do have data, let me go fast on this. The data basically say that when you have dogs and shepherd and enclosure, well, predation is really reduced to very few events per year. So this data is there and is available. So control of predators, why not? Can be done somewhere, but has to be done in a rational way, biological way, sustainable way, and when it's justified. By saying that we eliminated the conflict by killing the wolf, well, I don't accept that. That's not coexistence. That's one way. Let me go faster. And compensation. Compensation is a big, big issue. In 1971, when most of you were not born yet, had not been born yet, I proposed the first compensation law in Italy to the Abruzzo region, and was approved. And I thought, oh my God, I've done really something good, socially correct. If we want to save the wolf, why is the shepherd to pay? We all society should pay, and I was very proud. Now, 40 years later, I say, don't think so. So from a philosophical point of view, I'm still convinced that's the way. But have compensation really made a difference in wolf conservation? We do not have any evidence that this has been working. They may help in getting part of the society on your side, but doesn't really help in preventing poaching, for example. Does not help in preventing illegal killing of wolves. So in theory, the compensation programs are not meant to reduce depredation, but only to alleviate the social conflict. But all national experience that we have indicates current compensation programs are not effective in reducing the conflict, nor in preventing illegal wolf control. So the situation has to be reanalyzed country by country, because every place is a different story. I don't want to make generalization. What is good for Sweden is not good for Italy, but I would say what is good for Galicia is not good for Lyon. So that really, every situation has to be looked at independently. Let me go faster here. Yeah. So there is no one recipe. Every story is a different one. In the course of this last 20 years, since the wolves were re-expanded in Scandinavia, for example, when they expanded in Sweden, Finland, and Norway, I have received many letters from colleagues, veterinarians, forestry people from those countries who want to come to Italy, to Abruzzo, to look at the wonderful way you Italians coexist with wolves. I say, what? We have no wonderful way. Actually, there are a lot of conflicts. But if you want to come, you're welcome, of course. And they come and say, well, because you found a way of protecting your livestock with your dogs. Oh, wait a minute. Our dogs work very well with those shepherds, with those sheep in those mountains. If you change one of these components, the system doesn't work anymore. For example, between Abruzzo and the Alps, still in Italy, the system doesn't work because in the Alps, the shepherds have been selecting a different kind of sheep that doesn't group together. Actually, they have been selected to scatter around, to use the pasture in a different way. And you can't guard a scattered flock of sheep. They must be grouped together for the dog to work. So, you know, there are many little details that you have to know to make the system work. Every story is a different one. In Tuscany, you know, where it is south of Florence, there were no shepherd after World War II. And shepherd came from Sardinia. Now there are 5,000 shepherds with hundreds of thousands of sheep in that area. The Sardinian shepherd do not know the wolf because the wolf has never existed Sardinia. So they don't have the wolf in their pastoral culture. And they refuse the dogs. They are afraid of the dogs, the shepherd. They're afraid of the dogs. And so they refuse. And the damage are very high. So there, again, you have to find another solution. So let's stay away from generalization. Okay, wolf-human relationship, still a lot of hunting and poaching, tolerance and prejudice. And this is true everywhere. I always make the case of Sweden as the most civilized country in Europe. Don't be offended. But because the way they tackle the problems is very rational. The Swedish government has recently dedicated 2 full seats, how do you say it, full meetings to the wolf. The parliament. Can you imagine in Italy or in Spain maybe, I don't know, discussing wolves for 2 days and deciding how many they want to have, deciding targets. So they really take the situation rationally and logically. And yet, even in Sweden, there are only 8 million people, no sheep. Poaching is very high. So, you know, the situation is still wide. And then the last of the problem, big problem, is the European Union. We all love the European Union, let's say so. We all love it because it provides the Habitat Directive and conservation for many of our species. But the European Union is also the entity that issue big measures that affect our environment at large very deeply. For example, you all remember the set-aside program, when Europe was paying a fee to farmers not to cultivate their fields. This has been going on for years, and this has been very important for wildlife, because a lot of areas gained a new kind of wilderness, and the wolf actually took advantage of that. But also in Europe, they implement what they call it the Common Agricultural Policy, CAP. And you know, yesterday there was a discussion in Brussels for the new CAP for the next 6 years, and they didn't find an agreement. Because half of all our money in Brussels, half of it goes into the subsidies to agriculture, which is a lot of money, a huge amount of money. And that amount of money can change the way the environment is out there. So, to make the story very short, most of the livestock in Europe is subsidized by direct payment to shepherds, by support to the market, by a number of interventions. Now I go fast, I'm sorry for that, because some of you may be very interested in this, but in general, with the old CAP, every single sheep in Europe has been subsidized by at least 50%. So if the wolf kills a sheep, 50% is already paid by me, you, us. So this is a very good way to provoke shepherds, who normally are very upset when they hear that and say, I have never seen this money. Well, sure, you've never seen, but this money is going into a number of subsidies to the market. If we had not had these subsidies, the cost of milk, the cost of meat would be much lower, and there will be a lot of economic disaster across Europe. So I'm not criticizing the subsidies system now. I just want to point out that then the wolf, of course, is not taken in account when these decisions are made. Okay, the last of the big points is hybridization. This is a major issue. It's coming out in Italy as the most important threat to wolf conservation. I know that in Spain is also an issue in many areas, but it has been found, hybrids has been found from Finland to Israel, so everywhere. Normally, the reaction is to go out and kill immediately those few hybrids, if you identify them. But if hybridization goes spread throughout the wolf population, what do you want to do? Kill everything? That's ridiculous. So I'm afraid that in many cases, in many situations, if we don't do nothing, if we don't do anything, we will end up in having to protect hybrids very soon. I'm so sad to say this after 40 years of working on wolves in Italy, because that was not my intention at the beginning. But for 40 years, I've been fighting against my colleagues, geneticists, the National Institute of Wildlife, the government. They always refused to discuss hybridization. 10 years ago, I went to the Director General of Environment and our ministry and say, look, I have to talk to you. He's a good friend, huh? And he said, well, tell me. So I explaining the whole situation of the hybrids, and in the end he said, what did you say? I didn't hear you. So he just refused to listen because it's a very hot topic. Animal welfare group do not want to hear about removing animals or killing the hybrids. And I'm not proposing to kill all the hybrids. It's going to be very difficult. But in certain selected situations, we have to consider that. Anyway, this is a major issue. Okay, so it's hardly a success. How much time I have? Still 5 minutes? No. 10? What? Fine. Okay. Fast. So it's not a real success if we have more wolves today. It's just a matter of, I don't know, we have been lucky, let's say so. Or there have been a number of changes in the environment, in the social and economic context that have facilitated the growth of wolf population across. Okay, so what's the way forward? Is there any chance of real, substantial, consistent, permanent success? I think that there is very little chance if we continue the way we have been doing so far. So that's why with LCIE we try to move things in a new direction. And we have been able to convince the European Union that to effectively manage and conserve large carnivores in general, wolves in particular, you have to adopt a population-level management by population, which means Galicia cannot manage the wolf by itself, has to find a common plan with Asturias, León, and all the other regions who have wolves in Spain. I'm saying this because I'm in Spain now, but it would be the same in Italy, would be the same in France, would be the same all over. That makes sense. That makes sense. Makes sense because most of the population within one country are small. And being small, you cannot even reach the favorable conservation status that you have to if you really want to follow the Habitat Directive. But by joining forces with other countries nearby, then you more easily reach that favorable conservation status, and let me stress that, you can even kill some of the wolves because you have bigger number, so you have a more flexible management. So I'm saying this not because I want to kill wolves, but because killing wolves sometimes is an effective way not only to reduce the conflict, but to alleviate social strife on this issue. So the population level, we go back to our LCIE, back into year 2000 we produced individual action plans. That's old stuff now. We did it for the Berne Convention. And then in 2008 we produced these guidelines. They have been proposed to the Commission. There was in 2008 there was a big meeting in Slovenia with all the European countries, and these guidelines were approved. So now they are not a rule, they are not a directive, but they are one of the documents supporting the implementation of the directive. So they have been formally endorsed by the Commission. And now, while we are talking, there is a meeting in Brussels where the Commission is trying to convince the countries that reporting on the Habitat Directive for large carnivores can be done by population instead of by country, which is a major change in shifting mentality in Brussels. because within the country you may not be able to reach favorable conservation status, but by expanding at the biological population level, then you may be able to do that. Okay? And so these are the main population that we have identified. And but conservation in general, I mean, it's always, wolf management is in the end, as I say there, it's a decision-making process where science, analysis, and politics merge. But it's much more about values than it is about facts. So biologists are important. We are important. Of course we are important. We wouldn't say that. But politicians, social scientists are much more important. Because in the end, finding an agreement on managing wolves, it's a social process. And we have to manage it through the means and the opportunities offered by social science more than biology. So what do these guidelines say? Well, how to manage them? We need them to manage by population. This requires transboundary cooperation, which is difficult, is extremely difficult. Imagine, I mean, it took me years to get at the same table, around the same table, the director of the Ministry of Environment of Italy, France, and Switzerland. Years to get this easy task. So it's not easy. Cooperation, coordination, not the same as standardization. Need to formalize this kind of cooperation. So in the end, if wolves are increasing, this is a crucial question. How many wolves do we want? As I say, the Swedish parliament discussed for 2 days, and they decided 230. Yeah, okay, we can laugh, but chapeau to the process. Maybe not to the result, but to the process. At least they've been discussing the pro and con. Can you imagine the Italian parliament discussing how many wolves? I mean, it just make me laugh. I speak for Italy, but many other countries. Eh? So how many more and where? How do we reach the goal? Is this what we want? That was the original range of the wolves. Do we want wolves everywhere? If we allow them, they will. You can find them anywhere, but it's not. That's not the answer. That would be idiot to propose the answer. So where's the compromise? The Large Carnivore Initiative have been proposing this kind of philosophy. Do you want high density in small ranges? That is, small areas with high density of wolves? Or you want to have an adaptive density in larger ranges? Our answer is this one. We would like to see wolves everywhere in Europe, but managed in a way that they do not conflict, so that it's lower density. Artificial density, knowing that if you keep the density artificially low, you reduce the ecological role of wolves. That's for sure. But we are in Europe, 350 million of people here. We cannot speak of Europe as a Serengeti, and even Serengeti would not be enough. So, what future, not just how many wolves, but what level of wolf-human conflict can we tolerate? That's the crucial question. I would like to see the parliament of Sweden or Italy or Spain, whatever, discussing not how many wolves, but discussing, say, okay, this year we can afford 1 million, 100 million euro damage, whatever is. That's the crucial discussion. Not how many wolves. How many wolves is the wrong question. How many damage can we stand? How many damage can the government of Galicia support every year? 1,000 euro? 0? Whatever. Let's discuss it. But that's the crucial question. So, in the end, forget our biology study, ecology study. It's not an ecological carrying capacity we're talking about, but it's an economic and social carrying capacity that really makes a difference. And that's different for each area, and for each country is different. There is not one solution for all. But most important, this economic carrying capacity may imply limiting the potential ecological role of wolves. That's the compromise. That's the way toward coexistence. So that's our mission, in fact. The LCIE mission is to maintain and restore in coexistence with people. Not here is nature, here are humans. This is foolish in Europe. Viable population of large carnivores as an integral part of the system and landscape across Europe. So I think it's a very nicely worded, and the more I read it, the more I like it. So I'm very happy that we came up with that. So the population level management means more carnivores in wider areas, good science to inform the decision, but the decision is political. The decision is not biological. Are the politicians who have to take the responsibility to decide how many wolves and how many damage, but on the basis of good data. So management by biological population, hunting and lethal control is not a taboo. It's part of the management. Why not? Let's include that. And conservation with people support, not against people support. But wait a minute. People means all people, not few. So if I go to Abruzzo and make a poll of the public opinion on wolves and bears, you know the results? 90% of the people of society wants wolves. 10% do not want. And in that 10%, only 5% are really against the shepherds. But are we in a democracy? Or so should we take the decision of the majority and try to solve the problems of minorities? That's a healthy democracy. Not where a small group drive the majority. Because then that's not democracy anymore, it's demagogy. It's a different story. So, freedom within the frames. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias, Claudio. Abrimos un pequeño turno de preguntas.
Io entiendo castellano, si no habla, si habla despacio.
I have two questions. We know the populations of wolves increase in many countries in the last few years. Do you know how the populations of wild prey like deers evolve in these areas? And the second question, instead of paying the damage, why not to offer new animals? Wouldn't that be cheaper?
Okay, two questions. The first one, yes, in many areas wolves are increasing because wild prey are increasing. Italy has never been full of deer, red deer, roe deer, fallow deer, and wild boar like now for the past at least 400 or 500 years. So it's really, wild prey are everywhere. In the Alps, there is an overabundance of wild prey. And obviously, I cannot speak for all Europe, but certainly in Scandinavia, in spite of wolves, every hunter has one moose to kill every year. So, you know, it's plenty of animals, of prey. About giving back a sheep instead of money, we tried that. It doesn't work. But, as I said before, every story is different. Maybe you find out that in Galicia or in Sweden it works, so why not? It's a decision that should come out of a discussion with the stakeholders and with the livestock farmers. It's coming.
Thank you so much. I was late, but I follow your organization. Thank you. In which regards this compromising between politicians and social studies versus science. How much is the input of humanities?
Humanities?
Yes, how many people from humanities, for instance, environment history and so forth, do you have inside your commissions? Because I don't find this kind of people whenever you meet, for instance, now in Korea. How many are giving this input in order for politicians to really understand that it's really a case of politicians and mostly the common citizen. It's the issue is a politician issue, not just a case of science. Thank you.
That's a very good question. I fully agree with you, and in fact in the Large Carnivore Initiative we made an effort to include the people dealing with human dimension, social scientists. With in the group, some of us are experts on that, are social scientists. We strongly believe that only through tackling the human dimension issue you can hope to solve some of the conflict with large carnivores. So it's extremely important. And when we present the conservation plan to the Commission, they were supported by analysis of the human dimension. At the moment, we are working again with the Commission, and there will be on January 25th in Brussels a big meeting organized by the Commission, only with stakeholders, not with governments, not with politicians, only with a group of interest dealing with large carnivores, basically the wolf. And it will be essentially a meeting on social and humanities science.
Last question. Muy bien. Muchas gracias, Claudio.
Grazie.